back in the early mid 2000s era, right? Before there was MCU, Marvel animation was top tier, right? It's amazing. For those who don't know, back in the day, Marvel animation may have like a animated world of collected movies that was just like the MCU, predicated on the Ultimate Universe. And one of those movies were called The Next Avengers Heroes of Tomorrow, which was a movie that was based on what if the Avengers, settled down and started families. And to me, man, that movie was awesome. More people need to be talking about it.
All she ever says, come and see me for once. Come and see me for once. You don't ever come to me. Yeah. You don't ever come to me. Yeah. All she ever says, come and see me for once. Come and see me for once. You don't ever come to me. Yeah.
For those people who do know about the Marvel animated movies from back in the day, I've heard mixed discussion. It's been very polarizing, like most things in fandom are, right? I've heard people who said they loved the movies. I've heard people who said they thought they were trampling. Me personally, I loved most of the animated movies. Even the ones I didn't love, that you don't think I would be a fan of, because I'm not a fan of the character or like the type of stories they told, like Doctor Strange or Planet Hope. I thought they were pretty good. So, with that being said, I feel like as a fan of comics, it is my job to recommend and bring forth more awareness to comic related topics, movies, comic books that the general populace may not know of. So today, we're going to do a movie review on the next Avengers show tomorrow. And look, right, I know. I've done, maybe 2 or 3 movie reviews on this channel. My first one wasn't all that. It was my first movie review. My Power Ranger review, it was better. Hopefully, my goal is, by the time I have at least 5 reviews done, I'll have like a step point of what it should be. But to help me out with this movie review, what I did was I've come up with a rubric of sorts. So we'll see how it goes. But to help me out, what I did was make me a rubric. And this rubric goes into 3 categories I will be grading: characters, the story, and the overall cinematography. So, with that being said, let's get into my review for Next Avengers Heroes of Tomorrow. So the premise of the story is essentially, within the world of this movie, that the Avengers came together, as they do, to stand up against foes that one individual may not be able to handle alone, right? And eventually, once they thought all the villains were defeated, or that the world was stable enough where the Avengers won't need it as much, they settled down, had families, right? They had found love, and eventually they had families. They started having kids, but like as soon as the kids were born, like a few years after the kids were born, Ultron appeared. Ultron did what Ultron does. Ultron came and wanted to take over the world, wanted to wipe out humanity, replace it with machines. So, of course, the Avengers, suited back up, went out to destroy Ultron. But in the midst of it, they were killed. They were destroyed, right? However, one of the Avengers survived. And he took the kids and went to hiding to one day prepare them to save the world again, because the world will need Avengers, to carry on the legacy. Now, story-wise, summary, I think this movie was solid, right? I think the movie was solid. I have always said, maybe I said it once on the channel. If not, I'm going to say it now. I have always been an advocate for younger heroes. And if not an advocate for younger heroes, I have always been an advocate for passing the mantle, carrying the torch, right? I strongly believe that if you want to keep comics interesting, or you want to keep bringing in new readers and keep them going for generations and generations, then you need to at least establish new characters. And it will be great for these new characters to pass the mantles. Look at the characters we have now. Most of them have been around since the beginning, which is 50 plus years. And yeah, well, some of their stories, so some of the devices and lessons and stuff that are brought to them still hold today. But the generation changes, time changes, the things that the world goes through, the lessons that the world needs, they change too. So I feel like it would be better for you to introduce new characters to sync with the world's meaning and the messages and stuff. Plus, if you had certain events like deaths, there's certain deaths that I feel like should not be erased. Like, eventually, most of the comic characters we know, they have died. But you bring them back and they die again and again. After the first 2 times, it's not special no more. Like, if you want to kill off, for example, Superman, right? That was a great time to bring in his son or a clone or whatever and let him take up the new mantle. Then you kill that and then you bring in someone else for the next generation. That way you can keep like the story moving. You don't have to keep rebooting. You don't have to keep bringing back dead people and going over what the previous author did. So the idea for the Avengers to have kids made a lot of sense to me. And another reason, yeah, of course, these people, they're fighting robots, they're fighting aliens, they're fighting despots. No dip. They're not going to survive forever. Especially if you look at the Avengers. I mean, yeah, you got Thor, you have Hulk and stuff, but most of the Avengers are just humans. And they're not just like regular humans. They're humans who have their DNA altered. They're not going to survive forever. So yeah, I thought it was a good idea to have them have kids just in case, hey, we're the show, it keeps a realistic tone to things. Now, outside of the story, there wasn't a lot of stuff that bothered me, like story-wise about the story, except a few things. And one of those things was the pacing. I think the pacing of this movie, it's not too slow. I don't want to say it's fast, but it's quick. It's so quick that it's like, the way they told the story about the kids, they did like a flashback. And the flashback, gave you the rundown of what I told you. Like, there were the Avengers, they had enemies, they fell in love, and Ultron came, Ultron was defeated. Now, 13 years later, here are the kids. I didn't like that because I feel like with that, certain things could have been fleshed out more. One of the things that we know is that each of the Avengers, they basically fell in love with each other. Cool. But when they have kids, it doesn't really... There's some of the kids that, unless you do like research on them, you don't really get to know like who their mom or their dad is, or what their species is, how they got their powers. It's just certain things that like pacing could have done, that if you either like paced it out better or added like maybe 20, maybe 40 minutes to the movie, it would have been better. And I get it. When Marvel makes animated projects, most likely they're thinking kids and teenagers are going to be watching this, which is a bad way to think because, again, comic book lovers are everywhere, and comic book lovers just don't read comic books. They read comic books, play games, watch shows, watch movies. So, but again, I get it. If you're an executive in making anime, your first thought is kids will watch this. Kids lose interest fast. So you want to be able to get to the action, pull their attention. I get it. I get that. But like I said, I feel like there's a way where you can do that where you're not talking down to anybody. You feel like I'm saying? But yeah, like the story was fine. It was just the pacing. And like the way the story flowed, it made sense. Like the plot made sense for how, like, if you know of anything about Ultron, Ultron is not easily defeated. It takes years for Avengers to defeat him, and even when he's defeated, he's still not defeated. So for the Avengers to be killed by Ultron, that makes sense. For the kids not to be able to kill him, that makes sense. So the story made sense, how it flowed. There's just certain things that could have been explained or explained better if it was for the pacing. But other than that, the story was fine. So for the story category, the 3 points I had, again, were pacing, if the story was interesting and if it makes sense. So out of 3 points, I give it 2. Because like I said, pacing won't all that. But everything else, it was cool. So 2 out of 3. All right. For my next category I'm going to judge or review is characters. Now, altogether, this movie had about 10 characters, right? And though it had 10 characters, there's only about 5 or 6 characters that matter. Tony Stark, Iron Man, who was the Avenger that was left that raised the kids. The kids, you had 5 kids. And how I'm judging the 5 kids, I'm judging them based off of, were they interesting? Could I sympathize or understand them? Would I like to see them again? Were they defined? And did they develop? And the first kid that we were introduced to is Pym Pym. Pym is the son of Ant-Man and the Wasp. Before I talk about Pym, I'm gonna say this for all the characters. There was not one kid character that I would not want to see again. All these kid characters I would love to see again. I would love to see again, love to learn more about them. They were all interesting to me. And I think they were all defined pretty well. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the first character, Pym. Pym is the son of Ant-Man and the Wasp, right? If you know anything about Wasp, especially if you watch like Avengers Earth Mightiest Hero, Wasp is the party girl, right? And not as in the way like she's, distracted easily, whatever, right? She's a lot of personality. She's very exuberant. She's the heart and soul of the Avengers. She's very fun. That is definitely Pym. And if you look at Hank, he can be very condescending due to his intelligence. That's Pym all the way. He's a perfect blend of his parents' personality. And even though he could be annoying, it's annoying in the adoring way, in a cute way, because he's the youngest member on this team. While all his siblings are like, 16, maybe 17? He's like 12 or 13 years old. So he still has time to grow and mature. He's still young. But development-wise, like I said, he doesn't really grow. And maybe that's because there's not a lot of flaw in this character, except the kind of same thing. But like I said, he's young. He has room to learn and grow. Can I sympathize and understand him? Yeah, I can sympathize and understand with him. Like, there's a lot, like, again, that's another thing about the kids. You can understand and sympathize with every single one of them in one way or another. And what I mean by that is, Pym, Pym, you can understand all of them because they don't really know their parents, right? They was raised by Tony in an isolated area. So, you know, a lot of them, they feel confined. Understandable. You don't know your parents, you want to know more about your parents. You wish you had your parents to connect with them. Understandable. You want excitement. Pym, understandable. You're smarter than everybody else. You feel like you got taught down sometimes. Understandable. So yeah. So Pym was a good character. The next character we have is Azori. Azori is the son of Black Panther. And like I was saying, the story part of the review, Azori was one of those characters I had to do research on to find out how he has powers, what his mom is, because it wasn't really defined. And if you know Marvel Comics or whatever, you can take a guess at most of these things. And before I did my research, I had a guess that his parent was Storm, which I was right. Like I said, if you know Marvel Comics, it was right. And according to Marvel, he's a mutant who has her weather ability to control and manipulate and generate lightning and electricity, and his father's abilities that he inherited from the heart-shaped herb, like enhanced strength, cat-like agility, etc., right? Just like Pym, there's not a lot of growing that goes on with Azori. Azori is probably the most balanced one on this team, the most defined one on this team. And what I mean by that is, if you look at Black Panther, you know, Black Panther, he's royalty. So is Storm, but they're not like dicks about it. They're great leaders. They're very rational. When you piss them off, it's game over. And that's what Azori is. And I would love to see more about him. He's definitely one I would like to see about. Because it's like, okay, sure, the Avengers were killed. So it seems that the Avengers were killed. We could assume that Black Panther was killed. But, you know, when things go to shit, Black Panther's always, you know, rushing back to Wakanda to make sure he could protect the borders. So was Black Panther killed along, or did he go back to Wakanda? And if Black Panther was killed, what about Storm? Was Storm and the rest of the superheroes killed? But this is the dude who's royalty. I want to see him like going to Wakanda and see how they treat him, learning about his royalty heritage. Is he welcome to Wakanda as the next king, or is he shut out like Killmonger was in the Black Panther movie? I would love to see more about him. Next character we see is Thor. If you know me, I am not a fan of Thor. Thor made me want to be a fan of Thor. Thor is very, if anything, I think Thor was the character who develops the most in this movie. And what I mean by that is, Thor is very much like Thor was in the first Thor movie. You know, very arrogant, very cocky, full of confidence, full of hubris, and needed some humbling. This because she's Asgardian. She thinks she's a god. She thinks she's immortal. She thinks nothing can beat her. And very quickly, she is humbled. But the difference between her and Thor, while Thor was mainly worried about battle and himself before he got humbled, Thor is very loyal and very protective of her family. Another thing I had to look up, which again, if you know comics, like my guess was right, Thor's mom is Sif, for those who was wondering. Thor's weapon, I'm not sure if this is true in Marvel Comics, but I know within Norse mythology, Thor has had many weapons. Thor's weapon is Thor's first sword. And she can control, like, it's just like Mjolnir. Only she can wield it. It can control lightning and everything. So there'll be times where you'll see, like, Azori, like in her sparring, or him trying to block the team from doing something, and he'll channel his powers, and she'll absorb the lightning. Thorin was very interesting. Because like I said, she goes from being cocky and arrogant to being very doubtful. To being very doubtful and insecure about herself when she loses her first fight. She loses her fight and she's like, damn, my dad wasn't there for me. I thought I was invulnerable, but I got hurt. And after that, she's not very confident anymore. She loses her confidence and she doesn't want to battle anymore. She's scared. And I think Torin, she has the most fucked up relationship with her dad. Not in a way like her dad and her beef or whatever, but while you see all the other Avengers are killed, Thor goes back to Asgard when Odin dies. And he leaves Torin on Earth. Understandable. I think it's kind of fucked up that you left your daughter on Earth, though. Why Sif ain't raising her, or Heimdall. He explained why he left on Earth, saying he wanted her to learn what it was to be human like Odin did him. Here's the thing about that, though. You was older. You was a teenager and young adult. You was at least, 1,000 years old. You left Torn on Earth in a world that was already doomed by Ultron when she was a kid. She wasn't 1,000 years old yet. You left her as a baby. That's kind of fucked up. It's kind of fucked up. And she has to think if you're real or not. She doesn't really know you. Kind of fucked up, though. I can sympathize with that because, again, I don't know my father like that, for real. He just left us. So I can sympathize with her and understand that, too. The next character we're going to introduce is probably my favorite character, and that's James. James is the son of Captain America and Black Widow. While Thorin is the most developed, James is probably the one that's most defined. I know I said Zoro was most defined, or Pym, and what I mean by them being defined the most is that they're the most balanced. They're the ones who have, like, you could really see both of their parents shine to them. All right? But when I say that James is the most defined, James is the one. I think James is our POV character. James is the one you see struggling the most mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Right? You don't really see a lot of Black Widow in him, but you see a lot of Captain America in him. But not from the jump. You know, from the jump, Captain America, before he got a super soldier, he wanted to serve. He wanted to do what's right. He wanted to protect. When you're first introduced to James, he's lazy. He's messy. He doesn't really care about responsibility. He's like, man, screw it. I'm not training. I'm not doing this. It's all pointless, right? Just for him to find out, like, when things start going to wreck, he pulled the team together. He's very doubtful of himself. Not doubtful in a way like Torin is, but he's looking for someone to connect to. He's looking for someone to understand him. So when he finds, like, the Iron Avengers, he feels a connection to his dad, and he messes up. And he ends up developing. He ends up from being this person who's, man, screw responsibility to, no, we're the last thing our parents have on this earth. You know, Ultron destroyed everything. He took their costumes. He took their uniforms. He took their paraphernalia. We are their legacy. We're all that's left. We owe it to them to defeat Ultron. We owe it to them to keep the world safe. They did it for us. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take down Ultron. And I really, really enjoyed his character. The next and final kid we're introduced to is Francis, who is the son of Hawkeye and Mockingbird. You don't see a lot of Mockingbird in him, for real. But you definitely see Clint Barton in him. Man, everybody knows Hawkeye to be a wild card, right? A wild card, snarky, have attitude. Be like, you know what, screw this. But at the end of the day, he can be counted on. He has a heart to go. That is Hawkeye. Basically, Apparently, according to the movie, Hawkeye lived. Hawkeye lived for a time after the battle with Ultron. And he gathered the remaining humans, taught them how to survive, taught them how to hide. And then eventually Ultron got to him and shot him down. And his son took up where he's left off. Man, Hawkeye's arrogant and confidence and his wit is shown so much in him. And it's like, Francis is like, first he's like, I'll protect you, I'll do what you want. But to talk about my father again, one was fighting. If you call my father a punk or a loser one more time. Two, yeah, I have better things to do than get myself killed. But then at the end of the day, you see him pop up. Like I said, I would love to see all these characters again. I would love to see them again. They were all interesting to me. They were all defined pretty well. But out of like development, I would say the only characters that really developed was I would say Hawkeye. I'll give Hawkeye half a point for development, but I would definitely say Torin and James developed. So when it comes to the characters, those 5 characters, there's 5 kids, 5 categories. So I'll give all the characters a 5 out of 5 for defining. 5 out of 5 for interesting. 5 out of 5 for if I want to see them again. 5 out of 5 for if I can understand and sympathize with them. And for development, I'll give it a 2 out of 5. I'll give it a 2 out of 5. As for the rest of the characters, Tony. Tony was very good in this. You wouldn't really expect Tony to play dad or to play babysitter, right? Of course, he's mentored people like Ironheart and Spider-Man, but for him to say, you know what, this is my fault. I created Ultron. I'm gonna raise these kids. I think he did pretty well. Ultron was great. Ultron, I don't think I've ever seen an Ultron I did not like, except probably in the Avengers United Stand thing, which is another story. We're not gonna talk about that. But Ultron, he was menacing. He was good. He was intimidating. He was, Ultron. The other 3 characters, Betty, Hulk, Vision. Vision didn't really have no purpose. Betty was not needed either. Hulk wasn't needed, but when it comes to the story of how, you need, like, these kids, they're kids, you kind of need a helping hand. And, Iron Man's off the table, or whatever, Visions was off the table. I can kind of see why they had Hulk in this movie. But for my last part, cinematography. For this category, I'm going to be judging cinematography off of voicing the animation, the set, the dialogue, and the music. For the voicing, all the voicing was fine to me. Ultron's voice was amazing. The kids' voicing was amazing. I appreciate how they didn't give Zori an accent, because it wouldn't make sense for an accent. Yeah, your parents are African. Storm is African. Your dad, T'Challa, he's Wakandan. But you didn't grow up around Wakanda. You didn't grow up in Africa. You didn't grow up around your parents. So it would make sense for you to have an American accent. Pym, he sounded like a child who hasn't hit puberty yet. What it sound like? Especially one who's full of excitement. Torin, she sounded like a strong warrior. Francis, he sounded, all the voicing was great. Vision sounded great. Ultron sounded great. The only problem I have with voicing and animation, let me jump into animation before I get into voicing. Animation, I'm probably not a good person to judge animation or CGI. I have bad eyesight, and I can never say, when people say that CGI is bad or whatever, I never truly mean know what they see or what they mean. But the animation here, I actually like this animation here. When it comes to animation, my rule for animation or like drawings for combo, as long as the animation can hold me, I'm down. I'm down. There's animations that can hold me that I could read in a book that probably would have worked with TV and vice versa. I'm down. This animation, I like this animation. This animation for a movie can hold me. And the way they looked in the comic world can hold me too. So I'm down. So the way things were, the set designs were fine. It made sense for like them being in an isolated place. You see a world who's not really defined by humans, but once you get to the city, it's mostly technology. All fine, right? The only problem I have with animation and voicing is between Hulk, Betty, and Tony. Here's what I mean by that. We can assume, or at least I have always assumed, that in main continuity in the comics, whether it be main continuity or the alternate universe or whatever, Bruce Banner and Tony Stark are a few years apart, give or take, right? Let's say, okay, so Spider-Man is mentored by Tony Stark. Spider-Man is usually known to be in his mid-late 20s. So let's say that Iron Man is what? Early to mid 40s, right? Which makes Bruce around the same age, which would put Betty around late 30s, early to mid 40s, just like Bruce, right? Cool. So Ultron comes and he attacks the Avengers. The Avengers have families. Ultron comes back. Let's say that's give or take 2-3 years since the formation of the Avengers. So still in his 40s. You raise the kids 20 years. You're now in your 60s. All right? Cool. Cool. So if you get where I'm going with this, why does Tony Stark look like he aged? Tony Stark aged great. His voice ain't cracking or nothing. Okay, cool. But if Betty, Tony, and Bruce are supposed to be around the same age, why does Tony look like he just aged? He aged fine. He sounds okay. Betty looks old as Betty looks old as shit. It sounds like she's about 50, 60. Bruce sounds like a grumpy old man, and he looks like he aged terribly. The aging between the adults, voice-wise and aesthetically, does not make sense to me. But that's probably the only problem I have with animation. It seems that Betty and Bruce were barely in the movie for more than 10 minutes apart. I'm not going to count against it. And like I said, Tony was in the movie more, and he was fine to me. So I'm not going to count against it. Music-wise, the music was okay. I don't think there was a musical variety. I would have preferred a musical variety. So you can have like a different score for when the Avengers were fighting, a different score for when you're going through the title screens and everything. The score was fine. So I'll give the score a half a point because, like I said, I do wish it was a different variety. And the dialogue was so amazing. The dialogue, it was easy for you to understand if you're a kid, easy for you now, but they're not talking down to you. In all dialogue, it seems so organic. It seems to flow so well, like you're having an actual conversation. But not only that, it's like each dialogue that comes from each person's mouth matches their character. The way that Thor speaks, she knows she's Asgardian. She knows she's supposed to talk Shakespearean. Tony, he sounds like a mentor, but he sounds scientific. Francis, he sounds witty like his father. Zori sounds mature. So out of those 5, I'll give it a 4.5. Essentially, I'll definitely say if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's good. I would love to see these characters more. I was kind of disappointed when I started reading the Young Avengers because I wanted these kids to be in it. But they are and they aren't. And what I mean by that is the Young Avengers is a whole different team, which is basically the same team. But while these kids are like the bloodline of the Avengers, the Young Avengers are like picking up the mantle of the Avengers. These kids have appeared in very few comics, but they're in comics that are like based off of like alternative timelines. If they were brought into like the main Marvel universe, or if we seen like another show with them, like Marvel Rising, or another animated show with them, or they did like a sequel part, or they made more comics based off of these characters, I would love to see them. I would love to learn more about them. Like, let's see a comic where Azori is with his parents and he's learning about Wakanda, like a solo series. Or let's see James interact with Black Widow and Captain America. Or let's see him get trained by Ian Rogers and him being raised by Sharon as a mentor or something. Let's see Thorin in Asgard. Let's see, you know, I want to see that. I want to see that. Um, but yeah, let me know if you've seen the movie. If you did, what do you think about the movie? What do you think about the characters and everything? Let me know how I did with this review. Like I said, this is my third movie review. Hopefully, I'll get better and better. This is my first animated movie review, so the rubric was kind of in. Like I said, I'm I'm trying to do better with my reviews. But let me know how I did with my review. Let me know if you've seen this movie, and definitely check it out. But yeah, guys, I'll see you later. Deuces.